Welcome to the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, editor-in-chief of thenationalpulse.com. Well, the attacks are now rolling in thick and fast, almost too fast for the Trump campaign and for the president himself to respond to every single one of them. The Democrats are throwing the kitchen sink at the 45th president right now in what is palpably an overcorrection from their horrendous convention, their horrific riots, and their hapless candidate and his series of gaffes. Their approach is somewhat akin to having a drink to cure a hangover. But instead of having a Bloody Mary with brunch, they've downed a liter of vodka instead. Not so much hair of the dog as dog of the dog. It's a wild strategy designed to take the eyeballs off Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and intended to shine a spotlight on the alleged failings of a Trump administration. The charges are numerous and vast. From a clearly confected story in the Atlantic magazine about President Trump, the first president in nearly 4 decades to not start a new war, he hates troops or something stupid like that, to the new whistleblower complaint we told you about on this show yesterday, impeachment 2.0, here we come. And then there's the pandemic, there's the Woodward book, oh, and there's Michael Cohen, the evil Trump lawyer who CNN ran segments on when he said you can't legally rape your spouse. He's now CNN's bestie, Chris Cuomo's bestie, the guy Cuomo was coaching ahead of a CNN interview. And meanwhile, the president continues to close the gap in key polls around the country. Biden's ostensible 10-point leads are being reduced to 8, 7, 6, 5, and some are now within the margin of error. You know what that means, right? It means the president's actually ahead in all of these places, given the way the polls work and the way the methodologies are skewed. But this is no time for complacency. If the newly invigorated Trump campaign and his base take the foot off the accelerator, there is every chance the momentum doesn't just slow down, but comes to a grinding halt, and the nation can't afford that. The reason I say it is because everything has a breaking point. With the weight of what the establishment is currently throwing at the president, his supporters and his team need to be more vigilant and determined than ever. They need to be knocking on more doors. They need to be holding more rallies. They need to be fighting fire with fire and reminding the nation day in and day out what a Biden administration would look like. And just as I was planning to be on this show, the president tweeted this clip.
Fellow citizens for exercising their rights to peacefully protest. And peacefully protest. And peacefully protest. And peacefully protest.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
Grim scenes there. And while somebody sends tweets from Mr. Biden's account late into the night, to most of the country, Joe Biden has become largely irrelevant. He's not the front man of a campaign against a sitting president of the United States. He's a basement boy whose campaign staff are one missed Valium away from having a full public meltdown over. We know it's coming, mark my words. At some campaign stop in some remote location, you're going to hear a hot mic catch a Biden campaign staffer having a breakdown over Joe's latest flub, and I can't wait. In the meantime, the campaign turns into a case of signal versus noise. There's a lot of noise. There'll continue to be a lot of noise. But if you listen for it, which I think most Americans are, you can still hear and see and find the truth. The Trump administration yesterday announced a rescinding of over 1,000 visas for Chinese nationals deemed a national security threat. That's incredible progress on an issue that only an America First president like Donald Trump could achieve. Under Biden, more Chinese Communist Party visas, more EB-5 visas, more outsourcing of jobs to China to help Hunter Biden get richer. I'm so glad we covered that story back in April on the National Pulse. I'm glad to see some in the conservative media are catching up 5 months later. When we return, we'll be speaking to senior advisor to the Trump 2020 campaign, Steve Cortez, and I'm going to ask Steve what he thinks the response should now be, if there should be any to all of this noise at all. And what can we expect in terms of the signal in the near future? We've got a lot to get to in the next couple of segments. You're not going to want to miss any of it. This is the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, joined in studio by none other than Trump 2020 campaign senior advisor for strategy, Steve Cortez. Steve, thank you so much for taking the time being
Raheem,
here with us today.
Great to be here.
So what do you think? There's a signal versus the noise. Right. There's an awful lot of noise out there at the moment. And you know, tell me if I'm wrong, but this does really seem like a gut reaction from the Democrats and from their friends in the media to, oh my goodness, we had a horrendous convention. We've had all these riots that tie inextricably to us. You've got Joe Biden out there barely making sense when he's got three people around him.
Right.
I mean, what's it going to be like? Is he ever going to hold a full campaign rally? Probably not.
Right.
So am I right about this? Is this where this is all coming from? And are they burning through their October surprises?
They have to use the October surprises in September. No, listen, I think you're right. I think you're onto something. They're clearly in panic mode. And as you often say, there are no coincidences in this town of Washington, D.C. As soon as the ridiculous Atlantic story lie about Donald Trump supposedly dead soldier, never happened. As soon as that lie was being put down, was dissipating because it was so wholly repudiated, what happens? Well, here comes, quote, bombshell number 2, which is going to be the Woodward. Now, I believe this one is already starting to crest and roll over and turn down. There will surely be another after that. There's going to be a series of, quote, bombshells that are continuing to come out. But why? To your point, I think it's because corporate media knows, and let's be honest here, corporate media is simply the public relations arm of the DNC at this point. I mean, that is just the reality out there. And corporate media realizes that the momentum is on our side, is on the Trump campaign side, clearly. And by the way, the reason we have momentum is because the economy has momentum right now. In terms of separating signal from noise, you know what is not noise? Is the economic renaissance that's afoot in this country right now. The people know that. They understand kitchen table issues. They understand that their paychecks are rising, that they're getting back to work. We know we still have a lot of work to do, by the way. I'm not being Pollyanna and by any stretch saying all is well. But the point is the progress is material. It's accelerating. Because of that, our campaign is doing well. And the mainstream media, the corporate media, is panicking. And they're trying to throw everything they possibly can because they know that they don't have a candidate who can himself somehow pivot or who can make a credible case, for example, on the economy. And because they don't have they hardly have a candidate at all, much less a candidate who's skilled, what they have to try to do then is play this smear game. And it's despicable. It's reprehensible. I think from a campaign strategy, what we've done so far, I think has been good. We do meet the smears with fact. I think it's important. We can't just completely ignore their lies, but let's also not overplay it. Let's not give it too much credit. Let's get back to, to your point, signal from noise. Let's get back to the signal. Let's get back to talking things like the economy. The president, I think, does a great job of that generally of look, let's give the facts. Let's tell why these lies are false. But then let's quickly get back to telling our story, what's happening right now in this country and what can continue and accelerate into a second Trump. You mentioned the Woodward book, and I think there's a lot of people out there. I like to think I can channel this audience pretty well. Populist as I am, I don't particularly even care what I think. I care what they think. And they're the ones that are going to be voting. I'm not. I'm not going to be voting in November. They are. And I think they want to know, look, why does the president keep doing interviews with people like Bob Woodward? When it's so obviously going to be a hatchet job aimed at harming the president. Yeah, listen, I understand this frustration. I really do. And I've heard a lot of this in the last 24 hours from many of the president's most ardent supporters out there. My friends in the MAGA world. Why in the world would he talk to Bob Woodward? And I understand that frustration. But I will also tell you this, to the president's credit. He has been the most transparent politician in America. His availability to the American people and to the press has just been absolutely unparalleled. I mean, he uses social media. Some might say he uses it too much, but he uses social media to communicate in an unfiltered way on a constant basis with the American people. And regarding the press, a press which is very disrespectful to him, which is highly antagonistic. He ignores their behavior and still makes himself subject to their scrutiny. Why? Because I think two reasons. Number one, he knows it's important. It's important for the American people. This is a republic. He works for us. And even if that press is disrespectful, to some degree they represent us. They don't do it the way they're supposed to, but to some degree they do. A properly skeptical press has a critical role in a healthy republic,
right.
and we need to get back to that, by the way.
I'm trying.
That's right. Exactly. No, and by the way, shows like this are doing it. A lot of conservative radio is doing it. So I think we're seeing it bubble up. There's an emerging new media that's going to replace that old legacy media. And again, it's better for our republic to have properly skeptical media who bring truth to power rather than a bunch of activists who are masquerading as journalists. But my point is to get back to your question about why does he talk to Woodward then? So, a couple things. Number one, the transparency issue. But then the other aspect of it is because he can handle it. And what I mean by that is Donald Trump can sit down in the searing heat with Chris Wallace on the White House portico and subject himself to perhaps the toughest interviewer of all of television for an hour straight, live. All right, he can do that. He can talk for hours on end to Bob Woodward, one of the most significant investigative journalists in American history. And he's not afraid of that. Contrast that with Joe Biden. Who continues to largely hide in his basement. Now, he occasionally comes above ground now, and we're going to take some credit for that, the Trump campaign, for flushing him out, for smoking him out of his basement. But look, his team, they're completely wrong on policy, but they're not dumb. They see what's going on in the polls. They see the narrowing and the tightness. They know that these battleground states are up for grabs. They knew that they had, unfortunately, from their perspective, they had to get their guy out. They had to bring him above ground and in very tepid ways put him out there. Now, let's be honest, he's not out there, right? I mean, he's speaking to crowds of 3 or 8 people. He's either taking screened questions or not taking questions at all. So he's still not out there even 1% to the level of transparency of the president. But the point is, we're getting him out there. We're starting to force him to campaign. I believe the more the American people see Joe Biden, the more they hear of his agenda, the clearer the choice is going to become into November and benefiting us and, more importantly, benefiting this country.
Are you telling me that Joe Biden wouldn't sit down for 18 hours with Bob Woodward or Chris Wallace or Raheem Kassam?
Right.
It does beg a belief that they can get away with this for so long. I mean, Hillary Clinton almost had a similar thing back in 2016. She had, 100 days plus days without a press conference. And they seem to be running a very similar playbook this time. It's playing the man. It's not playing the ball. They keep attacking on personal grounds. I mean, the Atlantic story, and we're going to have more in the final segment on this show of the Atlantic and what the Atlantic has been doing with the Transition Integrity Project, which is a whole other story that we'll get into in the next segment as well. I mean, we have been punching on that on this show and on the National Pulse website for weeks now, over a month now, and it's deeply distressing. But you would think they would have learned something from 2016. Your candidate clearly isn't well. Joe Biden's now coughing and spluttering all over the place. I don't know if you've seen that. That was what was happening with Hillary back then. The same thing with the black community. You ain't black if you don't vote for Joe Biden. Hillary Clinton, I carry hot sauce in my purse. It's the same thing.
Sure. No, the pandering is once again out of control. And that's what I'm trying to tell people, too, is that it's important to differentiate, and we talk a lot about this in the campaign, how the radical wing of the Democratic Party now exerts control that it never had before over Joe Biden. But also realize this, to use a sports analogy, to some degree they're masking the coverage. And what I mean by that is they're acting in football terms, our football, Raheem. They're acting like they're playing zone, but they're actually playing man. What I mean is the radicals are part of the tent, for sure, and they need them in the coalition. However, it is the corporate globalists who will be back in charge if Joe Biden were to win. So, I mean, this is back to the future in many ways. It is back to a pre-Trump, pre-populism framework of the world that benefits multinational corporations at the expense of American work.
You believe that the globalists are using the Marxists rather than the Marxists being able to puppeteer the globalists after this?
Well, look, either way, the point is they have this unholy alliance,
Either way, it's bad.
This terrible fusion of the two. But yes, I believe the globalists are in charge. I mean, if you really look, it's the corporatist globalists who are the driving force. They're the finance of it. They're the brains of it. And they're willing to tolerate the Marxists and the radicals. That's what I believe. But again, if I had that equation wrong, who cares? The point is they're joined together in a nefarious union against the self-interest of the United States.
We're going to go to a quick break now. When we come back, we'll get back into that because a fascinating point. The Transition Integrity Project, really very much a globalist project, is pulling the strings here. This is the National Pulse, and we'll be right back. Well, it's not often I have somebody who's better at talking than me in studio with me. Trump 2020 campaign senior advisor for strategy, Steve Cortez, is in the house today. Steve, thank you for being here. And I mean that genuinely. I mean, you had this great radio show in Chicago before you remigrated here to Washington, D.C., back on the campaign. I guess my question, I mean, I asked Jason Miller, he came on last week, how is the campaign? Like, how is it being back in the thick of it?
Right.
Jason told me he's getting no sleep.
Right.
Is it the same?
No, 100%. Look, it's incredibly exciting. I'll also tell you the negative side is the pressure is immense. I really think our country's future is at stake here. Now, every campaign says that, but I really believe it's true this time, and I'll tell you why. I'll give you an actual reason, is because of what Joe Biden has already told us he will do regarding amnesty for illegal aliens in this country. And not, by the way, not even just amnesty for the ones who are here, but inviting more to come. Kamala Harris said she wants to decriminalize border crossing. Both of them said they want taxpayer-funded health care for illegals. Biden says we're going to give them citizenship, which means voting. I don't think it's an exaggeration, Raheem, to say we could be looking at America change forever if we lose this election. And by the way, some people might say, well, we'll keep the Senate and we'll stop him from doing that. He'll do it by executive order, and I don't think we can count on the courts to stop. The courts have been largely remade by President Trump, but we have a lot more work to do there in the second term on the courts. So to get back to the campaign and my role, I will tell you there's a lot of weight to that. I mean, I take that very seriously. You know, I love this country. I want this country to be for my children what it was for me and then for my grandchildren someday. So it's really important. At the same time, of course, it's fun. There's an enormous amount of energy. You've been around campaigns in your life. I don't think I'm that old, and I'm the old guy in the office.
Oh, really?
So there's just a bunch of 20 and 30 somethings, you know, particularly the digital teams and, you know, all the smart kids who know a lot of stuff, you know, that I don't know about technology and social media. And everybody is working until, you know, the wee hours into the morning and then back again and ready to go at it. It's an incredibly energized group of people. It's one of the most positive cultures that I've ever been around in a workplace. It's incredibly exciting. You know, to some extent, I need it to end because you can't live this way forever. But on the other hand, I'll be bummed when it ends.
Yeah.
And by the way, I hope it ends. I know we're going to talk about this. I hope it ends on election night or very, very shortly after. The Democrats have other ideas.
See, this is why you know you come from that. The segue was flawless. Okay, so let's
But
get.
then if you point it out, it's not flawless anymore.
No, I mean, it's still flawless. I'm just complimenting it. All right, so that's the thing. All right, November the 3rd is supposed to be. I mean, it's the last day you can vote. It's not voting day anymore. It's the last day you can vote. But November the 4th, everyone's telling us you're not going to get a call. AP's not going to call it. Wolf Blitzer's not going to try and call it. Mark Zuckerberg's out there saying, actually, if anybody does try and call it, we're going to suppress them and say, no, you're not allowed to claim that you're the rightful president.
And who
of the United
elected
States.
Mark Zuckerberg?
Right.
For what?
Right.
Yeah.
And when you look at Facebook's oversight board, which is the only part of Facebook that can overrule the CEO and founder Mark Zuckerberg, I think it's 95% of them are overtly leftist, globalist, Democrat.
Yeah.
And I think 3/4 of them, and Natalie Winter's in the studio, she'll correct me if I'm wrong, are foreign nationals. They're not Americans, not American citizens.
Right.
So even the people who can hold Zuckerberg to account, they have no business in this election. So let me ask you this question. What is the campaign going to do on the night of November the 3rd or the wee hours of the next morning if and when President Trump has a massive lead? Do you think he will claim a victory? Sure.
Well, yeah, let me tell you this. Let me first give you the optimistic scenario. The optimistic scenario is that we win so big that they just can't contest. Okay, and I think there's a possibility for that. And we can't remotely be complacent. We can't be cocky. We've got to grind and earn every single vote. But I also don't think it's a low percentage probability that we win big. And what I mean by that is we hold every state we held last time, plus we flip places like Nevada, New Mexico, Colorado, New Hampshire. I think that is a distinct possibility. And that's what I really want to work toward. And if we win that big, then I think even as detestable as these people we're talking about, like the Facebook executives are, they will be unable, with even an inkling of honesty then and credibility, they will be unable to try to contest the results.
But they've said themselves, remember, Hillary Clinton said, under any circumstances.
Sure. No, well, I was going to say, that's the optimistic, but let me give you the not so optimistic,
give me
which is probably more realistic, is that we win, but we don't blow the doors off, right? We win it in a way we did last time, which, electorally wasn't exactly close, but still, I think close enough for these kinds of people, for these kinds of treacherous villains, really, to try to manipulate. And in that case, what do we do? And the campaign is thinking and talking and planning a lot about this. Number one, we have a crack team of lawyers, so that's critical. We are ready. We have already litigated quite a bit about the universal vote by mail issue, or threatened to litigate. We've been very successful behind the scenes at stopping a lot of states that wanted to do what states like Nevada are doing, unfortunately. And even there, we're still in court. But we have a team of lawyers, number one, so that will be important. Number two, people like me, people like Jason Miller, our friend in common, are going to take to the airways, because to some degree, it's possible that we have to win twice, right? That we have to not just win the vote, but we have to then convince the people that we won the vote. Right. So there's a legal side to that. There's obviously a major media arm to that. And we are ready for both. The campaign has said that we are prepared to effectively campaign beyond that date. So of course we think and believe and hope that it will be settled election night or extremely shortly after. If it is not, though, we are fully ready to continue to engage in the battle. Look, it's unbelievable to me as an American that we even have to think about this and that we have to plan, but we have to plan.
The Transition Integrity Project says it's going to turn into a street fight. Right. Those are their words, street fight. And at the same time, in the same document, they're saying that it'll be the Trump mobs that start the violence out in the street.
Because MAGA people are smashing windows all over this country and attacking police, right? I mean, it's reprehensible. Here, let me tell you this. This is the reality. The fact that they're even talking about this, much less doing it, and it could happen in this country. What this tells me, I think, and what it should tell, I think, any right-minded American is they hate Trump more than they love America. They hate our movement. They hate American nationalism more than they love the ideals of this republic. I mean, that's what this shows you, that they really, truly believe in a win at all costs scenario. And if it burns the country down in the meantime, so be it, as long as they get political power. But they believe in political power by force. We don't have to guess about this. We've seen what they're doing in the streets of Chicago, Portland, Washington, D.C., other places. They believe this is a fascist movement. I don't care if they're called anti-fascist. Right. It is a fascist movement that believes in political power through force and intimidation. Sometimes it's subtle intimidation. It's social network pressure, that sort of thing. Sometimes it's very, very overt intimidation. It's we're hitting you. We're breaking something. As we saw after the RNC speech, right here, blocks away from the White House. So, but again, let's win big. That takes care of a lot of problems. If that doesn't happen, we'll be ready.
All right, well, when we come back, I'm going to try and convince Steve Cortez to teach me about the economy, because I am absolutely terrible with numbers. We'll be right back. More National Pulse right after this break. Well, I mentioned at the top of this show that there is just so much out there right now and so much going on. We want to get to as much of it as possible. In the last segment on this show, we'll be talking to Natalie Winters about the Atlantic magazine and what it has in common with the Transition Integrity Project. I'm also going to talk to you about this new Netflix movie, creepy thing called Cuties, which has led to the hashtag cancel Netflix movement breaking out on Twitter and across social media this morning, and I'm pleased to say that I have actually also cancelled my Netflix subscription as a result of it. But we're back here with the National Pulse and Steve Cortez, Senior Advisor for Strategy to the Trump 2020 campaign. Steve, we've known each other for some time now, and you will know that every so often I come to you and I go, can you please explain what's happening in the market to me? Can you please explain what's happening in the economy to me? And I'm not, I think I'm not a total moron, but some of it goes totally over my head. A lot of it, why the market is reacting the way it's reacting when you have certain jobs numbers that don't necessarily meet the trajectory that the experts thought it was going to be on, but then the market will still go up on the back of all of that. And I can't fathom it. People say to me, it's built in, they already thought about that scenario and whatever, and I just can't follow any of it. And now you're talking about something called a super V, and just please, for somebody like me, who I can barely find. I was going to say I can barely find my checkbook. I don't have a checkbook anymore, but you know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
I barely can balance my own books at home.
Sure.
So please explain to me what the heck is going on out there, because all I'm seeing is the market's going up and up and up, and I'm like, but don't we still have lots of problems out there?
Right. So, look, number one, it's a compliment to you in a way that you don't understand all the economic data, because it means you're too busy doing your job, right? And you're great at your job, which is writing and broadcasting. And that's true of a lot of people, right? They don't have time necessary to watch the economic data. I do, though, okay? It's part of what I do for the Trump campaign. in my previous life before politics, it's all I did professionally. For 25 years, I was on Wall Street trading desk, trading all of these global markets, covering some of the biggest hedge funds in the world. So I do have a level of expertise here, and I have an affinity for it. And it's so critical to politics that I try to meld the two, the money and politics together. And so even though I'm no longer full-time in the markets game, I'm paying attention to this data. And so to get to the super V, because the president was talking about a V-shaped recovery, and there's a lot of talk about that. Will it be a V, or will it be more of a U, where we sort of trudge along the bottom for a while before we come back up? And I'm making the case, and the president's been using this term, that it's not a V-shaped recovery. It is a super V. And what do I mean by that? I mean, everything cratered in the spring as we shut down, clearly. And it was unavoidable at that point. When you shut down an economy like the United States, all of the data is going to careen lower, and it did. But the rapidity of the rise since, and the forcefulness of the recovery since the economic renaissance in this country has been absolutely astounding. It has surprised even somebody like me, even as optimistic, and MAGA believing as I am. It has surprised me. More importantly, it surprised Wall Street. So one of the reasons that the stock market has done so incredibly well, and it's been volatile the last few days, but nonetheless, the S&P 500 hit an all-time high just last week. So in context, it's been an unbelievable rally. And by the way, I don't like to focus too much on the stock. I like to focus way more on Main Street. What's going on with jobs and wages and things like car sales. So if I could talk about that, because that'll, I hope, explain and exemplify what I mean by a super V.
I don't have a car either. So
well, okay.
I've got another subject I've got
exactly.
no knowledge about.
It's amazing, by the way, how good you are at connecting with the people, what a populist you are, when personally, in a lot of ways, somebody could possibly take you for an elitist.
What are you trying to say? No, they call me the international nationalist.
Exactly.
No, the thing is, I grew up in London.
Yeah.
I don't need to drive. Everything's public transport. If anything, I'm more of a populist. I was on the tube, crammed in like sardines. No, but seriously, so I don't know how any of this stuff works. So explain
car
to
sales.
me
Let me
car
talk about
sales
this
and why that's an important
And if
metric.
the audience out there, once the show is done, we don't want anybody clicking off yet, but once the show is done, if they go to my Twitter, I'm posting a lot of these. I call them chalk talks. It's sort of Coach Cortez taken to the chalkboard, talking about economic data and trying to explain things visually. And I explain the Super V in auto sales. And what I mean by that is year over year percentage change in car sales. And this is the kind of real world data that I love. This is not somebody's opinion, Raheem. It's not me just trying to make the president look good. This is hard, real world data about what's going on in the economy. We came into the year, auto sales year over year were up 6.6%. Nice, healthy growth rate, not off the charts, but we were doing great. Not surprisingly, once we shut the economy down in the spring, cratered. It went all the way down to negative 24% year over year car sales. Everybody was home. Nobody was car. Nobody was getting in the car they had, much less buying a new one. But that was not surprising. What is surprising is how fast we absolutely vaulted up off of those March, April lows. And we have now hit our most recent report, positive 8.8% year over year car sales growth. That is the best number that we put up in 4 years. So my point is, it's not just a V shape, it's a super V. And what I think is important for the Trump campaign and for the president to make the case to the American people is that you don't have to bet on us that we can make the recovery happen in the next term. Even that, I think, would be a reasonable proposal to the American people, given what Trump did in the first term. But we don't have to say, trust us because it will happen. No, we can say it is happening right now. It is unfolding presently in the United States. There is an economic renaissance that gains steam in this country, and it is impressive and real, and things like car sales can't be faked.
Right.
Again, and this is an opinion. We are roaring back to economic life in this country. That can continue. It can even accelerate with a second Trump term. If we elect the wrong man in November, all of that can come to a grinding halt.
By the way, I can't swim or ride a bicycle either.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can't swim.
No.
Do you get close to the Potomac, or does it scare you then to be near water?
It's a little bit scary. Yeah. A little bit scary. I've started to go in swimming pools lately, if that helps. So look, the car sales stuff, really, I appreciate it as a metric, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious as to how America is faring versus other G8 countries.
Sure. No, glad you asked. For example, and here it does make sense. Again, I told you I don't love the stock market as a quick indicator, but when you're looking at country to country, it's actually the best. It's the quickest, easiest way. Where is international money flowing? International capital can go anywhere, right? It can go into any bucket. And the United States bucket is absolutely soaring ahead versus the rest of the year all year, but for that matter, even before the coronavirus, but certainly since the lows of the spring that were caused worldwide because of the Wuhan virus. We have seen the United States stock market. So global capital, and that's also important too, because again, it's not an opinion. there's a lot of international money managers who can't stand President Trump, don't necessarily like the United States very much for that matter. But you know what? When it comes to placing their money somewhere, you know where they put their money? The United States of America. Because they know this is the growth engine of the world.
Steve Cortez, we'll be back with Steve for one more segment after this short break. I'm Raheem Kassam. Can't swim, can't ride a bike, can't understand economics. This is all I'm good at, sitting right here. I want to thank all of you guys out there who are going to the National Pulse, thenationalpulse.com/support. We'll be right back after this break. Getting a text message in the break from the CEO of the network that says, Cortez is right, you blew the segue by pointing it out. Steve Cortez is my guest in studio, Trump 2020 campaign senior advisor for strategy. Steve, the president's heading to Michigan today. Compare and contrast with Senor Biden.
With Joe Biden, yes. No, he's going to have an airport rally. It'll be, in terms of look and enthusiasm, it will be the diametric opposite to Biden. But more importantly than that, in terms of substance, because he actually has a message for Michigan, a state that he won in 2016, a state that we're fighting very hard to win again. And that's a message, as we talked about in the last segment, of economic growth and revival. But let me contrast that with Joe Biden. Joe Biden had the gall yesterday to go to the industrial heartland of the United States, go to the state of Michigan, and give them his supposed plan for bringing jobs back from China. Joe Biden, this is like an arsonist who burns down a village and then returns to that town and tells the citizens, please make me your fire marshal. Trust me for your protection. Joe Biden spent his half-century career here in the Washington swamp exporting American jobs all over the world, from places like Detroit to places like China. And he did it, by the way, through NAFTA. It wasn't all China, but a lot of it China. He did it through NAFTA. He did it through most favored nation status for China, through inclusion in the WTO. The only job that he created for an American, by the way, was for his son, was for Hunter Biden, by bringing him along, tagged along with Dad on Air Force Two, to secure a $1.5 billion investment from the Bank of China, controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, even though his wayward son had no track record in that industry. So
it's like me doing it.
Yes, that's right. His, on both a personal level and on a policy level, the audacity of him to go to Michigan and actually try to tell voters in the heartland that I'm going to bring jobs back from China, when his entire career in Washington, D.C. has been devoted to the exact opposite trend. It's laughable, and we need to point that out.
Do you think people get that? Do you think people instinctively feel that?
I do. And, I think they get it. I think they also realize, for example, the last time he was there, he hasn't been in Michigan for 6 months, Biden, before he went yesterday. And by the way, he would say that he couldn't travel because of the, quote, science. But nothing in the science changed in the last 2 weeks. The political science changed in the last 2 weeks. That's why he started to travel. And again, I'm glad he's traveling. I want him out. I want him to be exposed to the American people. But my point is, he ignored Michigan for 6 months. The last time he was there, to your point, though, about people getting it, the last time he was there, that's when he got in that infamous shouting match with the hard hat, blue collar auto worker who didn't want his guns taken away. Right. And if you remember, it was so dismissive and confrontational. Joe Biden actually even told him, I don't work for you.
Right.
I mean, so I think
people say something like, let's go outside.
Yes,
or something.
And he challenged it, which, by the way, I don't think would have ended well. These were some pretty tough looking, was Midwestern factory workers.
It doesn't matter. I mean, it wouldn't have ended well if it was a small child challenging Joe Biden to a fight.
Sure. But my point is, both on substance and I think even just on approach, I think that these Midwest voters are going to know that they do know that Joe Biden, again, is a committed corporatist globalist. The media has tried so hard to make him into this almost caricature of, he's Lunch Bucket Joe and he's from Scranton, PA. He hasn't lived in Pennsylvania since the 1950s.
Right.
Okay. No, this is a Delaware senator, and I mean that in terms of his corporatism. He has been the beloved Beltway best buddy of corporate CEOs in this country and all around the world. And I would also tell you, multilateral organization. So he didn't care about American workers. He didn't care about American sovereignty. He was more than happy to sell out Dayton, Ohio to Davos. He was more than happy to sell out American sovereignty to organizations like the WTO, the WHO. We can keep going with the whole alphabet soup of bureaucracies that exist for their own benefit to the detriment of the member countries and citizens. So the contrast in Michigan, I think is stark. And I'm very glad the president's going there immediately, right on the heels of Biden. and he's going to make that case powerfully tonight.
It's like, I mean, he says he loves Amtrak, right? I mean, you can see why he does, because every stop along that eastern route, he's picking up a check.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great point.
He's
the Acela corridor
racketeer.
Yeah, it's like the Pony Express of the Acela corridor.
So I want to get to a little bit of culture here, at least what you guys call culture, which is
Raheem.
This is no Pacino.
Can I hit you
right?
on live television?
you can try, but again, I say a small child might have a better. Look, the NFL returns tonight, and a lot of people will just not be tuning in. They fear, as I do, that this is now just going to be a love-in for Marxism, effectively. I mean, have you been an NFL fan? And
massive. No, listen.
Who's
football,
your team?
Well, the Chicago Bears.
Never heard of them.
If we do fight and you cut me, I'm going to bleed blue and orange. I mean, that's how much I love the Bears, which makes it all the more distressing what I fear is going to go on tonight and into this season. You know, the politicization of sports is just really unfortunate. The NBA is long gone. I mean, I've written off, unfortunately. But football was different, and the NFL, unfortunately, I'm going to watch tonight. I'm going to try to watch. But I think there's a lot of people like me, football fans, who are trepidatious and worried that it's going to become a gigantic BLM sermon, the entire game, and for that matter, the entire season. I don't think that's going to happen to college football. So I'm much more optimistic. And some college teams have already started. Major games are starting this weekend. The SEC, the big power conferences are kicking off.
Why is there this difference?
Well, that's fascinating. It's a great question. It's not nearly as corporately influenced, number one. But number two, if you look at the geography, particularly the college teams that are playing this year. So it's the SEC, the Big 12, the ACC, generally red state America. Which conferences are not playing? The Big Ten is the biggest of the big conferences that aren't playing. Generally, blue state America, or at least formerly blue state America. Trump's put that in play. But culturally, college football is far more of a Southern and conservative and church and gun loving type of phenomenon than is the NFL. And so I think that explains this critical difference between the two. So I'm hopeful and optimistic that college football is going to maintain its integrity and be about sport. By the way, I don't want conservative politics in there either.
Right.
I just don't want politics. Right?
I've never, I follow real football. Yeah. You play with a foot and a ball, not a hand and an egg. And we have the same problem in the United Kingdom. In the English Premier League, they're now wearing these BLM patches on. I mean, I've never wanted a football team to wear something that represented my politics.
Right. We don't want MAGA banners.
Right. Or anything of the such. Right. It just doesn't apply. It's supposed to be something that unites us all, not that divides us. Well, Steve, I'm really grateful for you being here. So just tell our audience where they can follow you.
So follow me, please, at Cortez Steve, Cortez with an S. And make sure, please, as I mentioned, watching the videos. I also lead a show every Monday night, Maganomics, which is shown on Team Trump Online, where I dive into economic issues from a macro perspective, as well as profiling entrepreneurs, inspiring entrepreneurs around America, people you've probably never heard of, but that you should know about.
Steve Cortez, thanks again.
Thank you.
Well, when we come back, Natalie Winters will walk us through the Atlantic and their ties to the Transition Integrity Project, this big globalist fix trying to steal the election. Remember what Hillary Clinton said? No matter what the circumstances, we'll see what the circumstances are going to be when we return after this break. Welcome back to the National Pulse. I always have this moment where I'm like thinking, welcome back to the War Room, welcome back to the National Pulse, and I mix them up. The War Room's on at 10 a.m. on America's Voice every day. The National Pulse is here at 3 p.m. and repeated later on in the day, especially because the President of the United States seems to have liked to take my time slot. But that's okay, he is the President after all. I'll be there one day. When we change the Constitution, Natalie, to allow foreigners to run for President, it'll be me. I just got this email, by the way. From I don't know if we can get in on that, but this is from Netflix. Yeah, there we go. From Netflix. We're sorry to say goodbye. Well, I'm not sorry. I canceled my Netflix subscription this morning because of this Cuties movie that's come out. Absolutely disgusting. Basically just pro-pedophilia movie that's out there. And there's this cancel Netflix hashtag that's going wild on Twitter and social media right now. Natalie, just very quickly before we get to the Atlantic story, what do you think about all this?
And what's more bizarre is the fact that there's been a host of movie critics and individuals in the mainstream media seemingly defending the film. Which
Wait, you think it's bizarre that Hollywood-adjacent reporters are in favor of pedophilia?
I think it's bizarre that we are at a point in American culture where that's not bizarre.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. What have you found out? Let's talk about the Atlantic, talk about the Transition Integrity Project, because, ladies and gentlemen, all of these things are inextricably linked. There are no coincidences. This isn't conspiracy. We're going to have an article up on the National Pulse about this today, walking you through it. Every time we do a story like this, we make sure that it's referenced, cited, everything is proper, so people can go away and confirm it themselves. But tell us what you found, Natalie.
Exactly. So to refresh, the Transition Integrity Project, which, as we've covered extensively, is linked to the likes of George Soros, the mainstream media, Democratic activists, the Never Trump movement. Their fingerprints might just be on this latest Atlantic story in which President Trump allegedly denigrated American military heroes as losers and suckers, which are bizarre comments that would never come out of the mouth of our president. However, Rosa Brooks, who is the founder of the Transition Integrity Project, she actually appeared on a radio show entitled, very aptly named, Deep State Radio.
Can't make it up.
You seriously can't make that up. And it, speaks truth to what this radio show is about. So the host of the show, David Rothkopf, actually introduced this Atlantic story on the show as, quote, a story that a friend of several of ours, Jeffrey Goldberg, ran in the Atlantic Monthly.
Say that again. He introduced, you've got the Deep State Radio host.
Of which Rosa Brooks is, quote, a regular guest on.
So Rosa Brooks goes on the Deep State Radio show, and then the radio show host calls the publisher of the Atlantic a good friend.
Yes, of ours, invoking the other guests who are on the show.
Such as Rosa Brooks.
Yeah, who retains a very close relationship with David Rothkopf. And even another guest on that same episode was talking about how he was keen that the Biden campaign had really weaponized the issue to gain points against Trump, to sensibly make it an issue. And what's even more concerning is the fact that Rosa Brooks has also written articles for The Atlantic. She's given them exclusive interviews, and even a staff writer at The Atlantic is part of the Transition Integrity Project. And even another...
What do you mean? Wait, well, who?
David Froome.
David Froome is at the Atlantic, that is correct.
Yes.
And he's on the Transition Integrity Project.
Participated in the War Games, and even another individual who appeared on the Deep State Radio show was identified by Rosa Brooks as, quote, helping shape the project.
Look, is the Atlantic a magazine or is it a political outfit?
Clearly a political outfit. You've seen the backers behind the magazine have links to the Biden campaign.
What do you mean they donate? Yeah, they
Exactly.
donate. Okay, so should we be considering everything the Atlantic magazine does in this election to be a donation in kind to the Biden campaign? Because that sounds exactly like what it's doing.
Exactly. It's a donation that's not necessarily monetary, but it's free media.
It's an in-kind donation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we reached out to the Transition Integrity Project for comment, both to really uncover the links between both the Atlantic and the project itself. Also, if Rosa Brooks had a relationship with Jeffrey Goldberg or had ever received payment for the articles she wrote, and they have still yet to respond to us. They've refused to comment.
The Transition Integrity Project, this laudable, transparent group of geniuses in DC, don't want to respond to us.
Exactly, all about openness and keeping things free and fair. They will not respond to an inquiry from media.
Can't make it up. There's so much more to unpack on all of this, and Natalie, just jump in here if there's anything else, but I just want to make sure we mention out there to everybody that the National Pulse website is the hub of all these things. You can find us on Facebook, you can find us on Twitter, you can find us on Parler, you can find us on YouTube. All across the board, all of our reporting, all of our citations, all of the unique stuff, the investigations, the exclusives. We broke this story of the Transition Integrity Project over a month ago. Now I know that other people are catching up to this story, other people are doing reporting around it. But if you want to be at the breaking edge, at the cutting edge of all of this, want to make sure you're heading over to thenationalpulse.com and also make sure that you're supporting our work. There is a button at the top of that website. It says support. You can join us for just $10 a month, and you get a signed copy of my book, you get a hat, you get a Discord chat channel with us, and you get a monthly town hall meeting with us on Fridays, which I guess is tomorrow because of the short week, thank goodness. We'll be reading out some of the names of our supporters on air, as we often do. We don't read your whole names. We don't want you to be doxxed. We don't want you to be accosted in the street or fired from your jobs for supporting conservative news websites. But we will read out the first names and the first initials of our latest supporters on the National Pulse. Natalie, we've got about 90 seconds left to go here. Anything else we should know?
I think an exclusive we had from about 5 months ago about how Joe Biden's son Hunter, as Steve was talking about, he really was the private sector complement to Joe Biden in terms of outsourcing jobs to other countries. He inked a deal with an American automotive company, which then partnered with a Chinese state-owned enterprise. And after that deal, you saw expansions in the form of factory and manufacturers only going to countries outside of the United States: China, Poland, Germany, the Czech Republic, Mexico, but no factories were opened in the United States. Like father, like son.
Father like son, and the conservative media reporting that this week, we had it back in April, not to brag or anything. We're very grateful for all of you guys out there watching, supporting. Continue to watch America's Voice. Excellent coverage of the president's trip to Michigan and beyond. All of the rally coverage is here always, remember, uninterrupted on this network, not like others who like to cut away to Karl Rove and other experts to cut into Dana Bash and what she thinks. Nope. We leave the decision up to yourselves. Ladies and gentlemen, you think you're big enough and ugly enough, as the rest of us are, to deal with the truth, unvarnished. It's an old English saying. You'll get it. We'll be back with more National Pulse tomorrow, 3 p.m. See you then.